So I've been really excited to do a podcast like this. And it kind of just, I don't know, I was texting you, Amanda, and I thought you were the perfect person for it. But I haven't ever really done anything on just being a female in the entrepreneur space. And I want to also put a disclaimer out there. This is for the women. This is not me talking about the patriarchy or any of that, right? This is not the male female dynamic, but I want to have a hard truth conversation with my female business owners out there, because I think sometimes you're going a little too easy on yourself. And so, Amanda, I know we have so many topics to dive into, but what are your thoughts on just the landscape right now of how, I don't know, various business mentors or female coaches, just the messaging around women in business is right now?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I was so excited when this idea came about. I was like, oh, heck yeah, we got to do this, because I wouldn't necessarily say that I exude masculine energy by any means, but I definitely have a more of like a hard ass, do the job that needs to get done sort of personality.
She
And I
also
think
has a full sleeve. If you're watching this or like listening instead of, you're like, she's like looking like a badass, but also glam because she's wearing makeup and I'm not per usual. So anyway.
no, I mean, no, it's all good. It's all good. I never know what I have going on. So always put the face together, but no, I completely agree with you. I think there's a lot of like, I'm just going to say the word. There's a lot of self-care talk, which we know that's important, right? But it's important for everybody, not just women. And it's important for, not just business owners, but just everybody. But I think sometimes it gets a little bit too far. And at the end of the day, we don't do the work that sometimes needs to just get done, right? Because of self-care has to be number one. I might get slammed for saying that, but
No, you're not, because I think this is a great like starting point, is this idea of self-care, because there's one thing to take care of yourself and to fill your cup before you fill others. I get that. But I think it's important to understand that like your cup is not always going to be full. Like it just isn't. I mean, I don't know a single time where I just walk around and feel like my battery is 100% charged always, right? I mean, I don't know about you guys out there, but like I'll use my phone as an analogy. Like I don't let my phone die, but at the same time, like it may be hanging out around that 50% a little too long before I'm like, let me proactively charge that, right? And so there's this message out there that like, there needs to be the mantras and the affirmations and all of this stuff, right? When
right.
in reality, dudes are not getting that same talk, right? Like they're not. And so what message do you think that portrays to women that are trying to do what we've done, building these, 7-figure businesses?
Yeah, I think I think number one, it's misleading, because so you take somebody that I guess before the whole self-care movement. So me, for example, I have built a couple of businesses, and it was all before this whole self-care movement. One of those businesses was, and you and I talked before, was an insurance agency. And I grew it from the ground up, grew it to one of the largest of its kind in our state before selling it. That wasn't easy. And it was in a predominantly male industry. Not that that's what we're discussing here, but with that, like the industry or the business, they don't care that I have kids at home. They don't care that I'm pregnant trying to build this business, right? I'm literally in the hospital in labor making sales. Like it doesn't matter, right? Building a business requires your time, no matter what you have going on. I took my daughter to my office 2 weeks after giving birth to her, so there's just times in life, like you said, your battery's not always going to be charged. It's not always going to be full. When you work a W-2 job, like you get 6 to 8, maybe 12 weeks of family leave, right? That's just a benefit that you get. When you're an entrepreneur, you don't have those benefits. Sometimes you have to do what it takes.
And I think there's going to be so many cases. And again, like when you're listening to this, there's going to be so many like asterisks or disclaimers, but I don't want to constantly have to say that. I want this to be a super open discussion. So let me be the first one to say, you can take a maternity leave, but just make sure you have the everything in place for that is what we're trying to
Yeah.
say, right?
Yeah.
Because I've had clients where they've done exactly what you did. I mean, hell, I had a client just give birth maybe a month-ish ago, and she was back coaching her clients in a week. I've also got clients where they've openly said, Taeler, I want a full month off. And it's like, okay, great. Let's make sure we're set up for that when the time comes. But to your point, right, there are just certain things that women typically have to do. Well, birth, obviously men can't do that. But you know, one thing, giving birth, having babies, things like that. But the other part is still kind of being the person who's taking care of the family. And even if you have a partner who is equal, right, playing the same roles, it's still, you're still a parent. There's still things you have to do. And so I'm excited to dive into the parenting conversation when we get to that, because obviously that is something that you can only speak on and not me. But I definitely have some questions for you that I want my clients or just listeners to hear when we get to that point. So kind of wrapping up this, like, taking care of yourself, what about this topic of like adrenal insufficiency that is literally everywhere? Do we think that, like, tell me more. Like, have you dealt with any of that before, or have you been more fortunate than myself?
So I feel like there's two sides of this, right? I feel like there's the side where it's a thing, and, you know, especially as anybody that's competed has really drugged their crap through the ground, like caffeine, overstimulation, under eating, over cardio, whatever. And, you know, I really do think it is a thing. I think it's, you know, something that you experience post competition. And if you don't, or it doesn't even have to be competition, there's runners out there, there's, you know, triathletes, there's all kinds of different, you know, people out there doing cool things. But we all know there's a peak, and then there's going to be a valley. And so I think it is a real thing. I've experienced it as well. It's just sometimes you trash it more than others, in my opinion.
I mean, I'm with you. And the reason I brought that up is because there's this huge migration into functional coaching, right? Everyone wants to be a functional coach now. That's
Right now.
freaking word. And nothing is wrong with that. Okay. I can say for myself, and Amanda, you can let me know, but I was hardcore IIFYM to the day that I died back in like 2015, you know, Pop-Tarts as the pre-workout and all that fun stuff. But anyway, we've all grown a little bit since then.
Cracking up because I was literally at Sam's Club staring at the Pop-Tarts yesterday, like, how remember I used to eat those?
Right? I know. I was looking at some cereal, and they literally do make Lucky Charms now that are just marshmallows. And I was like, damn,
I
would
saw that. Oh my God. I'm like,
and part of me is like, man, I kind of want to try that. And I'm like, absolutely not. We're not going down that rabbit hole.
just put a
Again,
little bit of cereal in there
a
though.
little snacky snack. Yeah, but you know, I will say, and I'm not going to rehash my entire story. I've got podcasts on that if you're curious, but I had some really bad adrenal insufficiency, and it wasn't from just competing. It was a lot of things that added up to that, right? That I didn't realize until it was too late. But what I'm noticing with like the functional movement now is that it's almost like we're classifying everybody into adrenal insufficiency, and everyone has weight loss resistance. And it's like, that's not the case. Now, is it going up? Yes. Is it something to look at? Of course it is. But I'm almost it feels to me like business owners, these coaches are getting kind of soft on how they're going to push their body, right? Like, we're almost afraid to like just push ourselves, I think, to our limits, right? And the reason I'm talking about limits is because, tell me what you think the most, I don't know, top 2 characteristics are for somebody who's trying to really build a 7-figure business, create an empire, build this legacy. Top 2 characteristics. What would you say that those are in your words? I'm just curious.
The first thing that comes to my mind is a self-starter. Like, you don't need anybody else's permission. You don't need to have the perfect answer. Like, you build the plane as you're flying it, kind of thing. That is probably my number one, is that you're a go-getter. You're going to get it done. Like, you don't need anybody to tell you. And then number 2 is you're going to do the work regardless of how you feel, regardless of what phase of your cycle you're on, regardless of if you were up until 2 a.m. Like you're gonna get shit done no matter what. Like, so I think those are the top 2.
Not the period cycles though. I mean, yeah, those are, I would agree with you, right? I've got a few that I typically say, and the second one, I feel like you and I are it's like we say the same thing, but I would just say grit. That's like what I usually
Yeah.
classify that as, right? Like the ability to just keep grinding, and something that I know I can speak about, but there's never been a phase in my business where I've actually been comfortable. I'm constantly uncomfortable, and that's what keeps me moving forward, right? And I think that when I hear grit, you could say resiliency as well, whatever, right? But I just find that a lot of my female entrepreneurs, here's the one thing I see on applications over and over again. I want to build a 7-figure business, but I don't want to sacrifice any time away from my family.
Yep.
But I don't want to work a ton of hours. But right? Like that's what I see. And I've literally never heard a male say that to me. None of my male clients have ever said that. Why do you think it is that women in particular are trying to scale without working?
That's so interesting that you say that, because and I also think it depends on the phase of life that you're in. As to why women are saying that, I think it's because of what is perceived out there. Because
Okay.
I think it's shown, I think there's a lot of false reality that you can have both. I think you can get there, right? But I don't think you're going to start there. Like when you're going to start, you're going to have to hustle. You're going to have that grit at the beginning. You could eventually probably work to that point, but it's going to come with not as much money, because you're going to have to hire certain positions so that you can work less, right? Like, because if you're not going to have all of your hands doing all the work, like you've got to hire it out, which costs payroll. And so those are some of the things that I think it's just vaguely misleading of what's portrayed out there, that you can have it all and
Do you
not
see
work.
that message like pretty frequently on the internet? Like what, I
I
mean,
do.
obviously we're not going to call people out, but like what are you seeing? What are you hearing frequently
You
out
see
there?
the houses in the mountains, driving the sports cars, working their 4 hours a day, making their millions. That's what I see. And
Allegedly.
yeah, and I'm like, that's cool, but show me your life 5 years ago when you were building that.
Well, that too, right?
Like Ed Milet, for example, he was already a bajillionaire before getting an Instagram account, right? Like we didn't see Ed Milet until he was already successful. Same thing with Alex Hermosi. Same thing with all of these big influencers that you see. They had already built what they have before they came online to show you.
Well, I think, I actually was writing a caption today about this, talking about like, hey, instead of copying your favorite mentor's Instagram, like, content strategy or whatever, like do this instead. And the whole point is, you have to work your way up, right? Because it's so funny because you said, no one was paying attention to Ed Milet or Hermosi or any of these people because they didn't have a presence online, right? And even if they did have a presence online, like for me, I started an Instagram back in 2012, right? And a business in 2019. But when I first started that business, I mean, I was going live constantly. I was, constantly pitching, constantly promoting, constantly in the DMs, like doing all these things when no one paid any attention to me. And then as soon as I started doing business coaching, not as soon as but once I built something that was worth looking at to other people, that was aspirational, right? They're like, oh my God, how did you do it? It's like all the shit you're avoiding right now, right?
Yeah.
And something that I would love for you to talk about is what I refer to as that season of no, where I think a lot of entrepreneurs, and again, specifically women, have a hard time with, because I think that women are naturally just a little more emotional in the way that they get attached to what's going on. And so my female clients are the ones that have a lot more mindset spirals, like not my men, right? They're like, I'm doing all the things, but it's not happening yet, right? Like they're looking for this instant gratification, or they just have a harder time like enduring that season, right? And so can you talk to me about what you've sacrificed to get where you are?
Yeah. So and I love that you bring up that season of no, because I think one thing business will teach you is to have a thick skin, to be okay with getting hung up on. I mean, before the whole online space, things used to be cold calling before they were like cold DMs. Like I would literally, like, they called it dial for dollars. I would drive around, shake people's hands, sometimes knock door to door. I mean, like, if you physically get the door slammed in your face or physically get the phone hung up on you, it's a lot more heartbreaking than getting a no in a DM or getting ghosted on Instagram. And so I think that season I am grateful for, because it was a lot harder, I think, to accept that physical no than an online no, which made me a lot stronger. So now I get ghosted in DMs, I get any of that kind of static, like it's no big deal. Right. And so I think that it just comes with, to answer your question, wrap that around, it just comes with the season of going through that. You have to go through it to grow through it. Right. And it's just one of those parts in business that you become better because of it. But I think that if you're unwilling, you're not going to get over that step.
Well, and I think too, like now that you're talking about sales, being a female and an entrepreneur, like we have advantages to men all the time, right? Like, and one is that I think we are inherently more sympathetic. Like when we do have more emotion, that can be a good thing as long as it's not derailing your business and mindset, right? And so I find that my male clients, for example, are like, how am I supposed to talk to random girls in the DMs, right? Like that's the issue there, where like no girl's ever been like, how do I talk to random people? Like we just,
right. Just
we're a lot
conversationalist. Yeah.
we're way less like threatening, I think. But my season of no, I would say, and there are still times where I do this now, right? There's just like sacrifices as a business owner. And when I first started my business, really the first like year and a half, to be honest, was very much no all the time. And I openly discuss how I've like lost friends and things like that. And I don't, and it was all good. It was all good though, right? Because I've just learned as I've become more successful, there are so many people in my life that really were only friends with me when I wasn't as successful, and I think that's a common theme that I've found in every entrepreneur, or with every entrepreneur I've talked to that's like successful right now. But, if my friends were all going out on a Friday, I'm like, oh no, I need to finish like an email sequence, or no, I need to like do XYZ. And it was temporary, right? But that season of no lasted for a long time. But so many people I talk to are in this constant cycle of debt, can't get out, or the wantrepreneur cycle. Have you heard of a wantrepreneur? Have you like heard people say this yet?
I've heard of it, but tell me in your words what that necessarily
it's like something that I've seen and I'm like, oh, that's a good one. So basically it's this person who's like going to all the conferences, getting all the certifications, listening to all the podcasts, but you're not taking any action, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like people get so stuck, is because it's this quick dopamine hit of like, I listened to this podcast, so like I'm going to do this. And then what are you doing? Turning around the next day, posting something once that you wrote the day of, and then, oh, I didn't get a sale. I guess I'm not there yet. Let me go read something else or learn something else.
Yeah. There's a lot to unwrap with that, because, well, with what we do, we see that all the time. How, I look at it as almost like paying for a college course and then not doing the homework, like not finishing it. Right. And so, yeah, you can't take everything that you've learned in a conference, but there should be, I call it the rule of 72. There should be at least 3 to 4 items that you take from going to things that you're going to implement from going to that conference within 72 hours, or it goes away. That's just something that I've always thought about. But I love that term of the wantrepreneur. I guess I've never quite heard of it put like that, but that is so true. We see it a lot. And I feel like things are getting more and more expensive too. And so we are seeing a lot more people getting, into debt to try to make their dreams come true. And when reality, like, you probably don't, education is so important, right? Like, I'm never going to knock that. Working with business mentors is vital to progress your career. A lot of times we plateau, we get at a stopping point. But if you're not going to do anything with it, if every time you talk to your business mentor, it turns into the same conversation as you had last week and you're not progressing, like, that's on you. Like, nobody, like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. I mean, it's the same scenario. And as far as like going back to, you know, specific sacrifices, absolutely. Like Sean and I are very, we're kind of anomalies where we live. Like we are not the people that we don't go out. Like if we do anything, it's going to be with our kids, but we've also had to sacrifice, you know, a lot of things as far as kids activities go. And I think that's one thing for parents to be aware of is there are going to be times when you can't make it to every single ball game. You know, I think that's another, I guess, false reality is my dad was at every single baseball game. And I remember my dad in the bleachers at every single basketball game. And like, that's really cool. But at the end of the day, it's like, you can't be at everything all the time. Something has to give.
I agree. You know, and I will say, again, disclaimer, like I'm not a parent. But I think even from like my experience growing up, like I came from a divorced household, which it is what it is. I think that's really common. But I mean, if a parent wasn't somewhere, I didn't take it as like, oh my God, that parent doesn't love me. Like that just was the situation and it was okay.
Yeah.
Right. And then, but to your point, this is not what you're just discussing, but I want to just at least give my 2 cents from like the kids' perspective of like how I
Yeah.
perceive that and like, you know, whatever. But when my clients are telling me like, hey, how can I build a business and just get all this time back with my kids? It's like, well, you're going to get all the time back with your kids. You're going to have business on your schedule, but your schedule does not mean less work. Like I work more in my business than I ever worked in my 9 to 5, which was a 60-hour a week job.
Yeah, I made a reel like, oh, what was it? I quit my 9 to 5 to work 24/7 or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, I think, in this is going to kind of lead into the whole balance discussion. Maybe I'm getting ahead of our conversation here, but I feel like from the parent's perspective, like you can't hold off being a good parent. Does that make sense? Like if you are trying to wait until your business is successful, your kid will be grown up and out of the house. And so I feel like it just is what it is. You can't make it to 100% of everything, but you can be present. Like I think I listened to a podcast of, it was probably Ed Milet or something, but he's like, my kids don't want an hour of my time. They want 10 minutes of my quality, right? Like they don't, like it's not necessarily the quantity, it's the quality of time. And so I think we can all find, and it's different, I think, when you have multiple kids too, because I mean, my parents had 4 kids. They there's no way they could make it to everybody's activity all the time, right? And so I think it's important to realize you have to fit it in when you can. You're not always going to be at every single activity all the time, but you're not going to miss all of them either. Otherwise, they're going to grow up right before your eyes.
How did you balance being like a new mom, right? So to those people that are listening out there that are either pregnant or in that postpartum phase, like how did you handle that while
So
running a business?
I have a very interesting situation because I competed 9 months postpartum and nationally qualified too. So I actually did really, really well. But it was one of those things where it wasn't an option. Like I just did the freaking work. Nobody gave me permission to do it. I didn't ask how I was going to do it. I just looked at my schedule and figured out when I was going to do what I was going to do. And quite honestly, when I was that dialed in, I felt like competing actually helped my career. And I know maybe not everybody feels that way, but I didn't have to freaking think about food. It was prepped. It was done. I got up at 3:45 in the morning. That sucked. It wasn't fun, but I did because I had to get the work in before I had to go to my physical office. You know, and there were times where I had to bring kids to the office with me. It was no big deal, but I almost felt like prep made life easier. So that's kind of a two-sided question because I was a new mom while going through competition prep and I just made it work. I don't know if there's any like 2-step formula or anything like that, but
There's no 2-step formula to doing the damn work.
Yeah.
And that's it's funny that you brought that up because like here you are talking about like sacrifices you've made, being a mom, competing, and that's something that we were going to chat about anyways, like this whole competition thing, right? Because there's been a handful of people that I have chatted with in the DMs that have said like, can't invest until my season is over. I can't take any more clients until my season is over. And like, bodybuilding isn't paying the bills.
Right. It's a
Like
hobby.
it's not. And not to mention, like, do you know how silly that sounds? Like, could you just not show up to your 9 to 5 because you had fasted cardio? Like, that's never gonna fly, right?
Yeah.
And
Or
I'm with
sorry
you.
guys, I can't feed you breakfast this morning because I have to go to the gym. Like,
Yeah,
or you're gonna
right.
be late for school. I can't take you to school on time
I gotta
because
finish my cardio.
right.
And the last time, well, my last season was in 2020, but obviously everything got canceled that year.
Oh yeah.
But what I think is interesting is, to your point as well, that was my first year of business, and prep was something that kept me like dialed in. And so when I was hungry, I worked. When I was doing my cardio, I was in the DMs. Like
Yep.
I was literally utilizing prep to get me further along in my business.
Yep.
And so
You were so focused
right.
that there wasn't time for anything else too.
Right. And I will tell you, like, it does get harder, at least for me.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, one of the things that I've always dealt with prep, because I am not one of those fortunate people who can eat a lot of food on prep, which is probably why my hormones were not very great. But at the last few months, like it is hard to focus. That does change a little bit, which then leads to more caffeine and all of those things. But my point is, there is a way to do what you want to do, whatever that hobby is, right? That would be like me now saying, "Sorry, I can't answer my clients. I'm going to a show." Like,
Right.
no, it doesn't matter what's going on. So the people that are listening right now, and they've got kids, maybe they're a single mom, maybe they're not, whatever it is, maybe they're prepping. Like, what do you want to say to any business owner who is struggling to just like do the work?
So I will say to any new moms out there, I did want to preface those first, it's different for everybody. I was a seasoned mom. Like I have 3 kids. And so that first kiddo, I had no freaking clue what I was doing. And the first 6 weeks were pure survival, right? Like who knows if I would even take a shower that day. So I want to preface that. Like everybody's journey and story is different. By the 3rd kid, I kind of had it down, right? And so I think that allowed me, being a seasoned parent, to do all of those things. But if you're struggling, the thing that you need to keep in mind is there is no motivation. There is nobody out there. There is nobody that you're going to start following. Yeah, you can maybe follow my stuff and you can get pumped up to do cardio at the same time as me in the morning, whatever. But nobody's coming for you. Like nobody's going to come and hold your hand and pump you up to get you going. Like you literally have to just do it. Like that's the literally only words of advice to give, in my opinion.
I agree. I just always wonder again, and maybe it's just something that I've noticed recently, but I just find that women in particular struggle to find that balance more so than men. It just from who I've worked with, right? I'm not saying that's a fact. That's just what I see. I mean, do you notice that with any of your clients or colleagues? Like, have you seen that trend, or is that just weird on my side?
I feel like as a woman, and honestly, my husband would probably even agree, he is a huge help. Like he's not one that like he changed all the diapers, like he did all the things. But for whatever reason, there is still more pressure, I think, on the woman. I don't know where that came from or why that is. I'm sure it came from obviously women always did the housework and the men went to work. Like that's just how it used to be. But there still is this, and I think it's just nurturing. Like we are the nurturers. And so for whatever reason, there is more pressure on women. And I think at the end of the day, like you really have to decide, what do you want most? Do you want this 7-figure career where you are going to have this balancing act and you are going to have this like work regardless of how you feel kind of mentality? Or do you want to be able to soak up every little moment and not work as hard and not make as much money? I don't think there is option C, right? Like, I don't think that there is, just having gone through both sides of those things. I think you can get there, but if you think you can get there overnight, I mean, maybe you can if you're a unicorn, but.
Well, and there's also this misconception that 7 figures means working less, right? And I talk openly about how the 3-hour workday is complete bullshit. Every single 8-figure, 9-figure business owner that I know is working 60, 70 hours a week. But here's what I will say, because I don't want that message to hit and somebody thinks, oh my God, I'm just going to work endlessly. Like, my work doesn't feel like work.
Yes. Yeah. And I did see some content that you just put out about that. And that's one thing that I will 100% agree with. There are obviously not every single thing
Sure.
about our jobs we absolutely love, but I will agree with you, for the most part, it's enjoyable. It doesn't feel like work. Like,
No,
there's been
yeah.
Sunday nights that I'm working and I truly don't mind. I'm not like, oh gosh, it's Sunday, I can't work. I'm like, I need to get this done. It doesn't matter that it's Sunday night. I just want to get this done because I don't want to have to do it during the week.
I
And
love
so,
working on the weekends when it comes to like
yeah,
marketing. I have a hard boundary. I don't talk to clients on the weekends, but content or things like that, or projects, whatever. I mean, because I'm uninterrupted on the weekends, like no team is bothering me, clients aren't talking to me. So I think that that's really nice. But yeah, like this idea that like when you scale, because it's just a new set of problems. So like, for example, graphics, I haven't created a graphic in like 3 years. I mean, that's something that I'm like, I'm not doing that anymore. Or, DMs, sales calls, like there are things that you outsource as you grow, but then
absolutely.
your work turns into like team management and leadership, right? And so
Coming
there
up with
will
other
be a
things.
point, yeah, there is going to be a point where you can take time off and your business makes money, because truly, when I take vacation, we still land sales. And
Yep.
I mean that, like, I am out of the DMs, I am not in them, right? We are still making sales. But that would not have happened had I had not made all these sacrifices. And I follow something that's called like the 70% rule. And
Yeah.
I think that this is really important for anyone that's trying to do any kind of balancing act, whether it's family or not, because y'all, even though I don't have like a traditional family in the sense, like, I need to find balance, whatever that looks like for me too, right? Like, we all have that. And so I follow what's called the 70% rule. So if you are looking to expand or scale, whatever it is, whether it's investing in the mentor, hiring the team member, whatever it is, when you're about 70% sure you need to do that, do that. Because if you wait
Yeah.
until you are floundering and you have no more time to give, you're going to spend way more time crawling out of that hole, right? So I always say, like, when you're about 70% of the way there, like, definitely make whatever that move is. And that's been
Yeah.
really helpful to keep me in my balance, because your business is going to have hard seasons. I don't really have calm seasons, like truly calm. I mean, there's always something we're working on, but
Yep.
there's definitely seasons that are much more enjoyable versus like grind, grind, grind. And I think that just comes with scale. And to me, scaling a business has never been about the money, right?
Right.
If I were just thinking about, oh, let me make millions, I would not be here. But I think of like, damn, I want my clients to do this next, or I really want to implement this next, right? And that in turn gets them better results, which brings me more money. So it's like a win-win. But I just think that so many women are trying to skip steps based on like influencers that they see online.
Well, and I think that you brought up a really good point. First of all, I love the 70% rule, because that's so true. Like, and we say that too, like, don't wait until it's too late to hire. Don't wait until, like you said, you're literally flooded. We say that a lot with debt, for example. Don't wait until you can't pay your bills to go to the bank and ask for a loan. They're not going to want to loan you money then. But you said a word earlier, and I want to touch on this, and that's the word boundaries. I don't want people to think that just because you need to invest more of your time and you need to work more doesn't mean that you don't need to also set boundaries. Because I remember when I had my coaching career and I was trying to get it taken off, and everybody probably knows this. We'll call her Susan, would text me at 7, 8 o'clock at night when I'm trying to bathe my baby and, do all the things. And you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get away from this. Just because you are needing to work more doesn't mean that you can't say no, or you can't put up your own boundaries. You can't have guardrails in place. That's going to be really important in order for you to scale and get to that next level. And so don't think that you're going to have this endless amount of work that's never going anywhere, because that's not what we're saying either.
I think that boundaries too are like, they're important for you as well. Like, for example, I will never do any work in my bed. Like, I don't bring my laptop in bed. That is like a hard no for me. But I'm also that person that like doesn't have a TV in their bedroom, because I just like think that that's just not what I want to do in my bedroom. So like,
if it were up to me, we wouldn't, but we've gone rounds on that.
See, this is why I'm not married, because there's no TV in the, I'm kidding. But you know what I mean? Like, people don't think about boundaries in that way either. Or like a boundary, like some people may start their days differently than others. And I think you can do whatever you want. Like, I don't think you have to have a morning routine. I don't think you have to do anything you don't want to, in terms of like how you start and structure your day. But I would advise you to have boundaries and stick to them, because to your point, like, I do not give any of my clients my cell phone number. None of my fitness clients have my cell phone number. I made that mistake early on, and the same thing happened. People were trying to bother me Saturday night, right? And
I'm going to a restaurant. What do I order? And yeah.
Oh yeah, that or like, oh, I need to change my payment. It's like, listen, it's Saturday. What do you want me to do about this? So, for sure, having boundaries. Yeah. Is there any? I guess this is kind of like along the same lines, but a little different. How do you and Sean like separate business from personal? Like, how do you guys make time for yourself? I feel like y'all are really great at like taking vacations, like kidless vacations and things. Like, how do you do that?
So it's kind of funny that you say that, because we just went to Jamaica and it was the first vacation we've been on in probably 10 years that was not business, that was not kids. So we could do better at that, but we do little date nights or little coffee dates. Again, it goes back to that. We do good with the time that we have. Planning this 1 week Jamaica vacation gave me so much anxiety. I can't even tell you. Like, it's almost not worth the vacation to plan for 2 businesses and 3 kids and a dog to be gone. So, and a lot of people are in that situation, right? And so this could be helpful, but we do a lot of, I call it our small minutes. We utilize our small minutes. So we may not have a weekend getaway that we can go do, but maybe we can go on an hour coffee date on Sunday without the kids. And so we do a lot of that. We talk business all the time. We can't help it. That's just, we both love it. We don't feel like we're working. That's how Sean and I operate. I know a lot of people probably are not that way, but Sean and I love to talk business. But we utilize like our small minutes that we have together.
Well, I think that's perfect. And I think also, to your point, like, you're in business together. So if you're listening to this and your partner is not in business with you, then you're probably not going to want to talk about your content strategy constantly with your partner. Like, that's different. And I love that, because something that I do with myself is I intentionally have like date times with me where I'm like, okay, listen, I know you're tired, but like, take yourself out, do something, go have fun, whatever. And I'm not the best about doing something lavish, because you guys know, I'm not a frivolous spender. So Sean's always like, spend more money. I'm like, no.
But it's amazing. That's why you're in the position you're in. So.
Oh man. So
we could have a whole nother podcast on that.
Oh God, yes, about Taeler's spending habits. Okay, just kidding.
No, about not being a huge spender and how much success it could bring you early on.
Listen, I know. The second somebody hits a 6-figure mark, they're like, spend more money. I'm like, no, do the opposite, save more. But yeah, so I will do little things like uninterrupted coffee, or like a lot of people listening know that when I wake up in the morning, I go for a walk on my treadmill, and that is my DM time. Every single
Yeah.
morning, I start my day in the DMs. Like that's just what I do. But sometimes I'm like, you know what? No, I'm gonna go walk outside and listen to an audiobook, and I'm not gonna touch my phone, right? Like
Yeah.
there has to be things that you do for yourself to give yourself that balance. And just know that like balance does not mean less work, right?
Right.
Like, because if you are building this business, there are going to be things that you don't love. There are going to be things that are hard. There are going to be things that don't bring you results today, tomorrow, or even next month. But that's where that grit, like we talked about earlier, comes in. That's where your support system comes in. Did you have to navigate anything challenging in terms of like losing friendships or relationships that like kind of weren't the best as you guys became more successful? I'm just curious to know.
So I would say that I was born for this because I've never been I've never been one that has had a bajillion friends, right? I've been the kind of person that's very amicable. Like I get along with everybody, but I've never had a ton of close friends. I would say also getting really serious about competing, you find out who your real friends are. And Sean and I both compete. And so luckily we are very supportive with one another when it comes to that. But I feel like we have a lot of friends from the networks that we belong to versus local like beer drinking buddies. Like we literally don't have any of those kind of acquaintances anymore. But we've realized like that's okay. Like we're good with that. We don't need like the beer drinking buddies.
No, and I'm with you because a lot of those circles, and I'm somebody that doesn't drink, and there's not really
Yeah.
a rhyme or reason. I'm just not really into alcohol.
Yeah.
I mean, I can count on like two hands how many times I drank in college, even just not my thing.
Yep.
Um, and the people that I knew, whether it was like college, high school, whatever, it's almost like that's kind of their thing still.
Mm-hmm.
And similar to you, well, this is not similar, but what's different versus similar? Different is that I moved around quite a bit for my TV job.
Yes.
Similar, the people that I met are now in my like various networking environments, right? And so to your point, they're in other states,
Yeah.
so people come visit me, I go visit them, but I don't really have a lot of people in my close proximity. And the people that I
Yeah.
typically meet when I'm out and about, that's the first thing they want to do. Let's get a drink. Let's do this. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. So I'm with you. I think that entrepreneurship is a weird thing to navigate. And I think that's why so many people struggle, especially women, because like us women, we value relationships. We value that closeness, right? And like depth to a relationship, whether it's a friendship or not.
Well, and I feel like, and I don't know how you are. I assume you're similar to me because we get along really well. I am not someone that, and Sean cracks up about this. Like when we go to an event where we have to like mingle with a bunch of people, I freaking hate it. Like I do not like talking about the weather. Hate it. In
Yeah.
fact, I am more of a one-on-one person. So if I can't get past that first layer, there's no depth there. I just don't do well. Like I don't want to really have a deep conversation with or anything further. If it can't be a past the surface layer conversation, I'm out.
Oh yeah, I'm the same way. And that's why like as I've grown my business, I've met so many people through, honestly, sometimes it's the damn DMs. Like
Right.
I'm like, "Oh, I don't want to sell you anything. I actually kind of want to be friends with you." Like,
I know. Yeah.
or right, or like through a mentor I've met people. And that's one of the things that I love. See, I said this recently, and honestly I stand by it. This is no bullshit. So I'm an only child. I like one-on-one connections. I'm not a group person. With that being said, though, I wish I would have joined like a mastermind or something earlier in my business, but I don't think masterminds were really a thing until the last like 2 years. And so I was kind of past that. But, it's so cool to see some of my clients like build these really amazing connections and friendships and go book trips together. And like some of them have like matching tattoos. Like it's wild, the community that we have. And I'm like, damn, I wish I had that, because I'm in this space where it's like most of my friends that are entrepreneurs, they're like way older and way further along than me, right? Or they're like not quite at my level yet. And it's hard to find the people that are like in line with you and can
Yeah.
really understand what you're going through, right? Because not only are we entrepreneurs, but we're also weirdos who have these like online businesses. Like, what's that? So people
Right.
don't
Like
get
your
it.
local community, like you don't have a real job. Like, you know what I mean? Like, to
Yes.
other people
Yes.
around you. Yeah.
I literally was talking to a guy in the coffee shop like last week, and I've seen him a few times. He knows I have a business. I was doing some coaching call, and he was like, "Hey, like, what do you do?" And my generic blanket statement is like business consultant. That's like all I said. And he was like, "Oh,
Right.
okay. Like, do you have an office?" And I was like, "No, no, no. It's like I work with online coaches. Like, I consult online fitness coaches." And the guy was like, "Oh, how's that going for you?" And I'm like, it's just the automatic assumption. And like, what, I'm not going to be like, bro, I run a 7-figure business. That's not something you tell people in public, right? But like,
Right. How
you know,
much
I
you
talk about money all the time, but not like in that setting.
Right, right, right.
And so it was just so interesting because there's still this like idea that if you run a business, it automatically is not doing well.
Well, and I had that same, so like when I sold, so my insurance agency was a brick and mortar, meaning I had like an actual physical location where clients would come in and out. And when I sold that agency and started, well, so I had a big online coaching business already, nutrition. And so when I sold that, I literally just navigated, then I had one career versus two. And, but it was the funniest thing because locally, people thought I was certifiably insane. Like, what are you doing? You're leaving for this weird online thing that you're doing. But but I love it. I love working from home. I love being able to go switch laundry around or pick up the kids at 3 o'clock or do this or that. Now, granted, again, that goes back to those boundary things, but am able to do all these different things by not having to man a brick and mortar facility. Like if my secretary is sick, it's fine. It's no big deal.
Yep. I mean, it's easy, right? Like, well,
Yeah.
that aspect's easy, not running a business.
Right.
But
Right.
the reason I bring that up is because I was talking about this recently about how like your support system may not be as supportive as you think. And so something that I hear, and this is for men or women, to be honest, but like when you think you have like a very supportive partner and they mean well, and when I say partner, this could be literally like who you're dating, married to, whatever, or even just like a friend group. But some of the comments that people make sometimes are actually not really that supportive, right? And so I think it's important to know, like, if you've got somebody that's constantly nagging you about spending more time with you, or like, oh, you're always working, I wish you were spending more time with me. A lot of my clients have come to me with that problem. Hey, my boyfriend really wants me to spend more time with him. Like, what do I say? And I'm like, you tell him you're in your season of no, and that you will make intentional weekly time to spend with him, right? And if you're living together, cool, awesome. That's really easy. But otherwise, like, hey, I would respect, or I would really appreciate that you respect my grind right now because I'm trying to do something really amazing. You know what I mean? Like, I think that we are so hesitant as women to say that.
Well, and I think, yes, we have to say how we feel, but I also think one thing that I've learned, 'cause Sean and I have been married for almost 17 years. It'll be 17 years on the 17th, actually. And one thing that I have learned is, well, first of all, we are both so supportive. We've been entrepreneur. I had one W-2 career out of college for a year, and then that was it. I've always been an entrepreneur since then. But him and I have been very supportive of each other's journey. And so number one, I can't really relate to that. And all of my friends are very much like, if I text you and I don't text you again for 2 months, like we just pick right back up. Like we don't, I don't have needy relationships, which is great. But what I will say to somebody who I feel like is going through that kind of situation is maybe you're not meeting their needs and maybe it's not a quality time thing, but maybe it's in another area. Like
Sure.
Sean, for example, he loves receiving gifts. He loves acts of service. And so like if the kids get the lawn mowed pristinely for him, he loves that. If I like his I don't even know, like if I buy him a couple of bows or whatever for his bow and arrow, he'd just be like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Like so maybe fill their cup in other ways instead of like it having to be quality time out of your schedule.
Agreed, for sure. I almost it's always with my clients who are just really on that first, like, I don't know, like that first quarter million year, like where you're like
Yeah.
really grinding and, you're
You're
not
not
in the
quite to the
season of
point where
just,
you can hire out other things yet.
right.
Yeah.
You're kind of getting
Yeah.
there, but you're not there yet. And
Yeah.
it's almost, and you finally realize that you're productive, not just busy, because that's a big one
Yeah.
too, right? Like if you're
Okay.
feeling burnt out, ask yourself right now, like, are you actually productive or are you just being busy and it feels
Yeah.
good, right? Because that's a
Yeah.
whole other story. But yeah, I think it's just listen to how people say things to you, right? Because again,
Right.
if every time somebody's like, "Hey, do you want to hang out? Hey, do you want to do this? Hey, can you do this?" and you're always putting your business second, that's
Mhm.
just something that you should look at as a red flag for yourself.
Yeah.
Um, are there any other like is there anything else that you've seen that you or anything you want to share to like the female entrepreneurs that are listening to this that are struggling to just like scale, to do the doing, to find balance, like anything else you could share?
Well, we didn't really, I kind of wanted to, I know we touched on this a little bit, but let's talk about the whole like menstruation
Oh, we're
situation.
gonna go there. Okay, we're gonna go there. We're gonna dive in. Okay. All right, I'm ready.
Because this is so like first of all, this is new to me. Like
New in terms of like,
the whole concept of I get that. I mean, yeah, once I thought about it, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I do notice different energies and whatnot during different phases, but it was an afterthought. It wasn't like,
oh yeah, I
oh,
put
I'm
notes in there.
in my luteal phase. I can't. Right. And so like ask me back in 2008 when I'm pregnant and a new business owner and trying to do all the things, if I was in my luteal phase and couldn't like do the things right then, like no way, that was not a thing. It was not even a thought in anybody's brain back then. And I guess I want to ask the question, like, why is it such a big deal now? And I think it again goes back to like and I don't want to knock on this, right? Because there are certain times of the month that are a little bit trickier than others. Me, I basically notice it in cravings. I want to have more chocolate than usual. But as far as like being less productive, I just don't, it's not my thing, I guess. I'll just say that.
Yeah, so I mean, I actually have clients that coach this specifically,
Yep.
and like here's my thing. I don't have anyone that is coaching that right now that is running like a massive company. Okay. And so, again, are there fluctuations during your cycle? Like, yeah, of course. No one's denying that. But I can't plan my content writing around my cycle. I can't plan my decision making around my cycle. Hey, Will, sorry, man, can't make a decision on that because I'm in my whatever phase. You know what I
Or
mean?
like,
Like,
sorry, babe, I'm gonna need you to not be teething this week because I'm in my luteal phase and I need more sleep. Right?
right,
Like,
right.
like
So for me, it's like awareness is one thing, sure. And I think that there's a lot of coaches out there that are saying really great things about all
yeah.
of this. And I think also, okay, let me let me flip the tables. Let's say we worked a 9 to 5 that we didn't like. Okay.
Yep.
Going to work, leaving, that's it. Just clock in, clock out. I think that something like this could be more beneficial because your life is so constant. And so
Yeah.
when everything is constant and you're relying on a paycheck, you're relying on everything being super consistent, you're not having to manage a lot of different things. I would say this could be helpful potentially. But some would argue that for an entrepreneur, this gives you some consistency to follow. I'm just not about it, right? Now, I also am on an IUD. So I will also say that, like, I don't really feel some of these fluctuations, maybe like some women who are not on birth control are feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But even if I was, I cannot operate my productivity based on 1 week out of the month.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I am not. I'm 100% not on any of that. So I feel all the fluctuations. But I think what you said, it's a really great tool to bring awareness. To bring awareness, like, oh, there's a reason I want to eat all of the marshmallows out of the Lucky Charms box. They're, this week. there's a reason why
I would do
I
that any week, but yeah.
feel there's a reason I don't feel like doing all the things, or why I don't feel as strong in the gym today. Right. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to do the work just because I don't feel as strong this week. So I think it should be deemed as more of an awareness tool versus, no, I'm going to press snooze because it's the 24th of the month or whatever.
No, I agree 1,000%. And to your point, like, I don't think anyone listening to this should make any decision based on how they feel regardless.
Yep.
Like, put it on a coffee mug. Like, stop making decisions based on feelings, right? I mean,
well, it's one of those things where it goes back to, like, boundaries can be more than just work boundaries. Boundaries can be like, I'm not going to allow myself to make an excuse to not do the work. Like, that can be a boundary. It's just like alcohol, 2-drink limit boundary, right? Like, I turn into a giant asshole after 2 drinks, so I'm not going to have more than 2 cocktails and make a fool out of myself. For example, right? Like, boundaries are great and they work in multiple areas.
yeah. I mean, the whole, like, that's, again, I think it goes back to like excuses. And for whatever reason, women have more of them.
Yeah.
In terms of like what we're talking about today, right? Whether it's like the cycle syncing, right? Again, not denying that that is a thing. I just cannot base my business around that. There's too much to get done, too much to do for that to happen.
Yep.
And all of the other things that you and I see with our clients constantly, because we work with fitness coaches, right? So like the competition preps and the off season, the on season, or prep rather, the fluctuations in hormones, like everything's always changing. Like, we're working with people that are grinding, pushing themselves hard, pushing their bodies to the extremes. And I think that my question always comes back to, if you're able to function this optimally in every other level, prep, whatever, why can you not show up the same way for your business?
Yeah. And also ask yourself, if you're not able to, so like for me, prep always seems to help my business, but I realize that not everybody's like that. But I think it's important to ask yourself, okay, if competition prep is not helping and it's actually a detriment because I am too tired, because I have too much brain fog, because I don't have the time, is my business, or is competition prep more important than my business right now? Or should I just do competition prep later when I have more capacity? Right. And so don't be afraid to ask yourself. I think that would probably be my biggest takeaway. Don't be afraid to ask yourself. It's just like, if you are expecting a baby or you're a new mom, maybe don't do a brand new product launch for like the first 8 weeks or so.
Maybe
right?
not.
Maybe not. And so there's just certain times where maybe going after your pro card isn't the right time in your business, or, things like that.
Yeah. And to ask yourself, why is that so important anyway, too? Like, what validation are you seeking? Not that I don't think that it's cool to go after it, but at least I know for myself, and I'm not speaking to you or anyone else, but when I was really competing and in my, like, the height of my season, so to speak, I was trying to find an escape from the job that I hated.
Yeah.
And so I find that a lot of people that compete, and again, not saying this is everyone, but typically it's your way of finding control. Like, you can control what's happening in prep, right? It's why type A people are bodybuilders. And so ask yourself too, like, is there something that you're not addressing in your life? Because prep is a 24/7 thing. It just is. It's not like a powerlifting meet where it's like, you're on in the gym, but you can kind of turn it off outside of that. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think prep can be a really beautiful thing. And I think that it can definitely help you in your focus. But if it is a deterrent and you're not competing for the right reasons, that's something to definitely address head on with yourself.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it doesn't mean that it may never be the right time. It's just maybe right now is not the right time.
Correct. Yeah. So long story short, cycle syncing, like, I know it's a thing. I don't follow it. I'm probably going to get some hate for that, but it's cool. I put it on the internet. So
I think if you're coaching it, it's a really neat tool to make people aware of. So I don't think that's what we're saying here, but what we're saying is, like, don't make business decisions and don't like allow the emotions you feel during certain times of the month to like determine what your day looks like.
Yeah, 1000%. For sure. So I'm curious though, if like, I just want to know if anyone has any like feelings after listening to this, would love to get your intake. But you know, like I said, I wanted to have an open discussion with somebody else who was obviously very successful in business with family life, balancing as best as we can, just to talk about some of these like, I don't know, like almost like taboo topics, right? Like things that no one is really talking about. With again, just the moral of the story being like, what's your why? Where's the urgency? What do you need to do right now to make it happen? Right. And I think that's been at least like what you've continued to say over and over again is like, you just have to do it. You just have to do it. And just having to do it does not mean running yourself into the ground. It doesn't mean burnout, but it does mean that your battery is not going to be 100% full all the time.
Yeah. You're going to feel tired sometimes, and that's okay.
You're definitely going to feel tired sometimes. Yeah, like I don't know how to get around that. But anything else that I missed?
No, I don't think so. I think, just reframing the boundaries are really important. It doesn't mean that you have to work yourself into the ground, but you're definitely not going to be fully charged, but having boundaries can definitely help you scale. And just to kind of circle back around too, I liked your point where you said, are you productive or are you busy? Because those are two very different things. And I think that a lot of times people find themselves not able to scale their business when they're just busy.
Well, it feels really good to have a to-do list and to check things off. But if your to-do list is the same thing as it was 6 months ago, what's going on?
Right.
You know?
Something
I think
good.
that people have this very granular viewpoint of their business and they have a very hard time looking at that vision, that bigger picture. And so it feels really good to just like get things done. But again, that's like making yourself busy, that anxious attachment with your business, where if you're like, I'm not in my business, I feel guilty. And I struggle with that myself sometimes, so I know what it's like firsthand to feel that way. So I ran into that a lot when I first started my business, where I was very hyper fixated on money. And so like if I was landing a sale, I was like, great, where's the next one? Where's the next one? Where's the next one? I had a very hard time looking beyond the next sale. And
Which
that was
probably
also
allowed you to get where you're at though, in a way, because sometimes if we think too far ahead, we don't get to the next step.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Don't start thinking about your 10-year vision if you're like 1 year in, but to the point, I couldn't see beyond like just one-to-one clients. I was like, what is next? And then I got to a point where I had 75 clients on my roster and I'm like, shit, I don't want another 75. So what
What do I do?
But yeah, so I'm going to link Amanda's Instagram handle below. You guys can check her out. Obviously, like I work with her and her husband, so no surprise there, but they do all my money things, all the tax things, all the investing things. So if you're looking for anybody to really get in the nitty gritty, they're definitely FitCFO is where I would go 1000%. And yeah, moral of the story, guys, balance is not something that you're going to just magically create. It's not a 50-50 split. Don't stress about it. But there is no one way to build a business. There is no one right answer for every problem that you have, but just be aware of right now, like what tendencies you have that are not going to be productive in your scale. I always say like audit yourself and try to be as non-biased as you can. Look at your efficiency, look at your leadership, look at your emotional intelligence, right? And see where you can start to make some tweaks so that you can get out of your head and actually make some moves forward.